For everything Dynasty Fantasy Football with your host, John Bauer.
I'm looking to sell everybody price dependent.
Dan Lamagna.
Too much dysfunction in Cleveland.
And Mitch Sorensen.
Well, it's hard to compete with excellence.
Welcome back to another episode of Dynasty Theory, a proud member of the Ross Tucker Football Podcast Network. I'm your host, John Bauer. You can find me on Twitter at The Bauer Club. And we are here tonight with a special late night episode of Dynasty Theory following the Tuesday night football game. I am joined by Dan Lamagna, that is at FF Coach Dan on Twitter. What's going on, Dan?
Gentlemen, this was a hard week for me. If it wasn't hard enough for all of us to start with these games being on again, off again, on again, off again, and the roster management we had. Dak's injury, boys, it got me right here. But I know you guys are going to get me through this, so let's do our thing.
And obviously, we're going to be talking a lot about that and the dynasty implications and what we're looking to do pretty much in every scenario possible, whatever your lineup looks like, whatever situation you're in your league. We're going to be touching on that tonight. And we're also joined by Mitch Sorensen. That's at DynoMC on Twitter. What's up, Mitch?
What's up, guys? I mean, it's really late. It's 8 o'clock here. I normally go to bed in 45 minutes, so we're going to try to push through it for the listeners.
And I apologize, and you guys can boo me. I can take some heat in the chat. I fell asleep a little bit before halftime. I just woke up. I'm still a little groggy, and I know I'm going to be awake all night, but I'm ready to rock and roll tonight. And hopefully we won't get too heated. It's good that I just woke up, I think. You guys won't have to hear me yell at you too much. I'll just be sitting here. Okay.
We get mellow John Bauer tonight.
Right.
Yeah, we'll see.
I have to get the goo out of my eyes here. I'm trying to wake up. Before we get into the Dak talk, because again, it's such an interesting situation. We are going to get there and we're going to spend a lot of time on it. Mitch, you wanted to talk about some quarterbacks with question marks surrounding them after week 5. And I'm going to let you drive this because I really don't know where you want to go with this.
Yeah, so the big reason why I want to bring it up is we're going to talk about Dak and the injuries and who to trade Dak for and all these other things. But there's a lot of quarterbacks in the league right now that people had as their superflex quarterbacks. And 5 weeks into the season, I mean, they might not have those quarterbacks anymore. We have Dwayne Haskins is going to be traded at any moment in Washington. Sam Darnold and the Jets, you pretty much can't play him right now.
Minus Lev Bell because he was just released.
He was, yeah. And then Phillip Rivers is so bad that Jonathan Taylor now sucks for the Colts. Denver Broncos, Drew Lock is like the shining beacon. And if that's your shining beacon for your quarterback coming back, I mean, that's a huge issue. And then, John, how many leagues did you lose this week because Jimmy Garoppolo is Jimmy Garoppolo?
This is a really bad week for me. And here, let me pull up. I'm probably around 30% rostership. And you messaged me the other day and you said, John, how do you have so many shares of Jimmy Garoppolo? Strictly because of variance, you shouldn't have him on this many lineups and rosters. But he was just so cheap in startups. He was going around that quarterback 20 price. So the way I maneuver around the draft, he fell to me in several situations. And I was thrilled to have him as what I saw as a reliable and trusty quarterback too. And he's putting up negative points. And it was heartbreaking because so many leagues I had Matt Ryan, he laid an egg, but he still did better than Jimmy Garoppolo, who was negative in a lot of leagues, depending on where your interceptions, whether it was -4, -2, whatever it is. But it was a rough week. And yeah, the quarterback landscape, if you didn't go quarterback early and heavy with the Mahomes, I mean, Dak before the injury, Kyler, Russ, Josh Allen, and that, Dan, we've talked about that. That's something that you like to do, always secure one of those quarterbacks, but it's going to be very interesting with this quarterback landscape. So many question marks. What are your thoughts there, Dan?
Yeah, Mitch puts it in perspective. We're dealing with the Dak news, but there's so many other variables. So hey, great. I got Dak as a QB1, but then like you, John, I have 3 leagues I'm looking at here where I had Jimmy Garoppolo, where, in Kyle Shanahan we trust. And, I think we're holding our breath here, hoping it's just that ankle injury and time off, and he does bounce back, but it does leave us with some concern. In Dynasty, if you're, a Haskins believer out of Ohio State, he's been relegated to like 4th string right now and is on the trade the chopping block pretty much. Drew Lock, we're hoping comes back healthy. Philip Rivers just has a wet noodle, guys. Like I'm like just 2 years in a row, I just can't watch him throw anymore. And the Jets are the Jets. Poor Sam Darnold. You have any of those guys, you're definitely at risk, and hopefully working the trade wire as best you can.
We'd even bring up like Daniel Jones, who's been awful as well. Carson Wentz is barely playable too. I mean, it's that quarterback landscape is drying up pretty quick when you get out of the top 20 guys right now.
Hey, don't forget your boy Gardner Minshew.
Gardner Minshew as well. Yeah.
Right.
I mean,
but in most formats, as long as it's not the heavy negative points for interceptions or if the incompletions, Carson Wentz has been, you can still start him. I just think he's not meeting the preseason expectations we all had for him.
So this could lead us into the Dak talk, because Dak was a quarterback who was winning you, and he was the reason why you were a contender. He was winning you games. A lot of these guys aren't it. And so with the Cowboys losing Dak, now that's that one more quarterback that teams aren't winning solely because anymore. And there's only 6 or 7 of those guys in the league right now. And so losing that's going to hit some contenders really hard in ways that people really aren't even looking at right now.
And this is
right there.
Yeah. I know, right?
And this is going to be the perfect situation, the perfect time to segue into the Dak talk. So you're talking about quarterbacks winning you games, average points per game. Russell Wilson, 30, Mahomes, 27, Dak, 27, Kyler, 27, Josh Allen, 30. And then you see Aaron Rodgers, 25. And then you see that dip into the 20s, 19, 18. So there is that drop there. And then Justin Herbert, he's around 23. But now you're losing one of those pieces that people were really relying on. And I had a tweet, I put that out there, and I said, this Dak Prescott injury has so many more immediate implications in superflex and 2 quarterback leagues and interesting conversations and dynamics to talk about than the Saquon Barkley injury. And what I mean by that, obviously the Saquon Barkley injury, a huge injury, but he went down in week 2, right? Week 2, week 3. And up to that point, just for this season, he was putting up replacement level numbers. If you have Devontae Freeman, I know the schedule's a little bit different, so I'm not comparing them skill-wise. Don't misconstrue that whatsoever. But now if you put Devontae Freeman in your lineup, you're not missing Saquon Barkley in terms of what you were getting at the start of the season. But now you have to find a way to pick up almost 30 points per game in most formats by missing Dak Prescott, and that's going to be a big hit. So what we want to talk about, we're going to talk about if you're a contender and you have Dak Prescott, if you're a contender and don't have him, if you're a rebuild and have him, or if you're in a rebuild and you don't have him. So we're going to cover every situation under the sun. And Dan, you're like, JB, we need to try to keep this around an hour. We can't be going on for 2 hours here tonight. And I said, guys, I know the show notes are long, but a lot of those are just my talking points. So we'll get through these. Don't worry. And you know that I keep things short. I don't like to get long-winded with my responses, right?
No comment.
As we're going here, I'm waking up, though. I'm waking up. I was so excited. I wanted to do this episode last night. I really did. I was so excited to talk about this because the injury, it's awful. And I have a few shares of Dak. Dan, we're going to get to you in a second because you're at 83%. You have Dak on 83% of your rosters. So an injury like this, you can tell our listeners exactly how to navigate in different situations. But I was excited to talk about this because as the dust is settling, we have to get back to the fantasy football aspect. That's what we're here to talk about. So while the injury is terrible, it's exciting to talk about the impact and the strategy around it. And that's kind of what excites me with an episode like this. Unfortunately, it's the situation surrounding it that kind of brings us back down. And we're not quite at Dan's level. I'm surprised Dak is still standing behind you, Dan. Mitch made a comment before the show. Does he have bandages? Is he okay? But Dan, I'm going to turn it over to you. This is your portion of the show. You have 83% Dak rostership. How are you navigating around this? And you can go in any direction you want here because, depending on your team makeup and your roster construction. So what are you looking at here?
Yeah, I've been hit fast and hard with Dak this week between trade offers, roster management, looking ahead to next week. I am that guy Mitch talked about in a few different ways, whether it was Dak was just carrying a team on his own, or I was dominating a few leagues because I was fortunate enough to have Dak and Cam, Dak and Russ, Dak and whoever. And now it's like, whoa, I gotta revisit everything. And the 2 weeks prior, you guys know, I mean, I was pretty hot. I was getting 88% win rates out of my dynasty teams. And this week I came down to earth a little bit. Cam was out with the COVID, and then Dak obviously, leaves the game early. 83% roster shares of Dak. As I evaluate this now, 50% of those leagues I have Dalton. All right. So I think I'm going to be able to fall back on Dalton and be okay still in leagues where I was lucky enough to have him. Some leagues, guys just didn't want to trade him, but I couldn't get him at what I thought was a fair value. Maybe I should have gave a little more in hindsight. I have 58% of Cam Newton shares. I just bring that up because, we talk about superflex and trying to have two strong quarterbacks. I was very fortunate this offseason to get some extra shares there. So I believe I still have an elite guy to fall on for now. What I'm worried here is these leagues where it's Dak and Jimmy Garoppolo, it's Dak and, I just don't have that depth. I don't have Dalton. I don't have another guy. And that's where I got to be more aggressive this week and focus my time. Where I'd want to caution the listeners is don't just give away Dak. The worst thing you want to do is trade him for I have one offer from Big Ben coming in. I like Big Ben. I think Big Ben could help me and a team this year, but I don't want to regret losing Dak in a year or two. Go ahead, JP. Wait, you got to time out.
Somebody offered you Big Ben for Dak straight up.
Mm-hmm.
And I made a comment. The people they're ready to pounce. The hyenas are circling. They're ready to jump on that carcass and take advantage. And some offers, and Dan, I don't mean to hijack it here, but there are some leagues where I put in the chat, I have 3 shares of Dak. And I said in one of the leagues, I need to find a quarterback. I am a contender. And I said, hey guys, Dak's on the block. I understand offers are going to be light coming in, but at least give me something to counter. And that's a situation. It's like, we're going to be so far apart. I can't counter.
Yeah, I'd like to go there. I've got 3 offers that stood out that I was disappointed in. And I know the 3 of us have been in a lot of group chats where we've seen people ask us, hey, would you trade Dak for this or whatever the scenario may be? And I know, John, you joked with me on a couple of them. I think they, Mahomes or I forget who the lead quarterback was there. And I said, I would do it. I think it might have been Russ Wilson.
It was.
And you're like, nah, Dan wouldn't do that for Russ. But I would. Now you're going to get my attention if you talk. I'm looking at about 7 quarterbacks where I would be interested in. Mahomes, Lamar, Deshaun Watson, Kyler Murray, Russ, and then Josh Allen, despite his performance tonight. So 6 quarterbacks that I would listen because I think they're putting up great points. They're in great offenses and they're young. But then the offers I received was like Drew Lock and Deontay Johnson for Dak and Gallup. I mean, Drew Lock, we talked about, we're not even certain about him, and you wanted me to give away a franchise quarterback. Big Ben, I told you, and I was also offered Matt Stafford for Dak. And again, I like Matt Stafford. Don't get me wrong. I'd love to have him on my team, but I'm not going to give you an elite quarterback where next year I'm like, all right, this is great. I'm rooting for Matt Stafford. And sorry, Mitch, those dysfunctional Lions that we don't know if they could get it together. So I'm telling our listeners, don't settle. Be very cautious before you give it away. And you don't win your league this year and you're ticked off next year as well.
Now, I would be very upset, Mitch. I want to bounce this over to you before we go full on Dak. And I call this episode quarterback question marks and the definitive Dak dynasty discussion. You all know I love alliteration. So if I can throw those the D in there, that's not a vulgar. We're not throwing the D in anywhere. I'm still waking up here. I'm groggy. But so looking at Andy Dalton, I think we have to talk about him for a moment. What are we looking at here? And again, you can take this any direction if you're a contender, if you're rebuilding. One of the biggest questions I've seen across my timeline on Twitter recently, since the injury, what are we doing with Andy Dalton?
Yeah, I think this actually boils down really easy for me. In Superflex leagues, I look at him the exact same as I look at Ben Roethlisberger and Drew Brees. They're both in really good offenses. They might have 1 to 2 years left, but we know Andy Dalton's the starter this year, same for Brees and Ben. And so I treat it as I want a first-round pick. I'd prefer it not to be a late pick, and more than likely, if you're trading Andy Dalton, it's going to be hard for that team to go out and win a championship. So how late is it really going to be? Go ahead, Dan. I see you upset.
This is the one piece that gets me this week when I hear people talking about getting first-round draft picks for Andy Dalton. So we don't even know where his future is going to be next year. You know, I think he's a solid super flex option. I think he's somewhere in between your Breeze Big Ben comparison. You know, because Breeze, we all believe he's going to retire after this season potentially. So, you know, what do you have next year? Nothing. Who is going to give up an early first-round pick for Andy Dalton? You could be trading Travis Etienne for Andy Dalton. No way.
So to counter that, no one's going to give up an early one because the early picks are going to non-contenders, and non-contenders aren't going to go out and trade for Andy Dalton. This is the teams who are going to be hopefully in the playoff race. So you're getting 106, 107, 108, somewhere around there. But the problem is no one is going to trade you Andy Dalton for a second-round pick. I mean, what is their incentive to do that at all? They could just play Andy Dalton each week and be okay with it. And so it's going to take at least a first to get him to move, in my opinion.
But what about a second round and a player? Why is it always got to be a pick?
It's the easiest way to explain it, because I could say like a second round pick and Damian Harris, right? But then you have to look at the leagues and be like, well, maybe the Damian Harris owner isn't willing to trade him. So then Damian Harris isn't really a player to bring out. But, I completely agree. A second rounder and a player is a really good thing, but it's just hard, just to be like, hey, get this, and then that much value added on to a second round pick.
I have seen people mention the fact they would move him for a second, but I think it's one of those situations where the people saying that don't have Andy Dalton on the roster. And of course, nobody knew this injury. It was a fluke injury. When it first happened, I said, and I said this out loud with the people, we were over my wife's parents' house, and I said, oh, it looked like his foot came out of his shoe. Initially it did. And then they showed the replay, and I said out loud, that his foot didn't come out of his shoe. But he was so calm. He sat there and he was like raising his hand for them to come over. And I was like, oh, they're just putting his shoe back on. No big deal. And then Tony Romo said, well, let's hope it's not a cramp. His foot's dangling. He says, let's hope it's not a cramp.
I think everyone in Cowboys Nation were hoping it was a cramp and he was just holding on, and you're just kind of hoping that it's not the worst. But I had that feeling, and then I replayed it again, and of course my 10-year-old son, everyone's talking about school, wanted to see Dak's injury, and literally, he doesn't know how much of a homer his dad is, and didn't want to look at it again. I'm like, and then my wife's like, no, you should show it to him. It's okay. So I show it to him again, and he tries to his first reaction is to bang his foot off the ground, almost like he wanted to put it back in place, Dak. I was like, whoa, I didn't notice that. And then he pointed it to the sidelines, and he knew it was out, and there went the Cowboys season if it wasn't gone already.
As Dan is showing his son Dak's injury on his phone, you see a few tears drop on the screen, and Dan's a little upset. No, but not to make light of the situation, because we're never hoping for an injury. But talking about Andy Dalton, and I was thinking about it. At some point, we talked about Andy Dalton early in the offseason, and I went back. It was an episode in February when it was still super flexology, and conveniently, Mitch was not able to join. This is when you were house hunting and trying to figure out everything. And Dan and I talked about some quarterbacks and contract situations, and Andy Dalton popped up for a good 10-minute segment. And I thought he could have been this year's Ryan Tannehill. Obviously, it didn't play out the way I expected because he went and sat behind Dak, but now he's going to have that opportunity, whether it's he shows out and maybe Jerry Jones plays hardball and they kind of use that as leverage internally, or he could find an opportunity somewhere else, because I don't think Andy Dalton's a terrible quarterback. I really don't. And I said it back in February. He had a terrible situation. I actually think he could be one of the top two backups that were in the league right now. So I think Dallas falls back. And from a real football perspective, I think he can keep them afloat, especially in that NFC East.
Yeah, good recollection going back to that past episode where we did look at, the potential he could be. And again, we didn't see it panning out this way. You think maybe Dak misses a game or two or some kind of injury or, something not so severe. But Dallas scored on Dalton because of COVID. I mean, it was at the time his family was in Texas. They didn't want to move the kids. It was really a COVID scare that he says, you know what, we're going to stay home, take this opportunity in Dallas, stay here for a year and see where it takes us. And then all of a sudden, boy, did he step into an opportunity, because he is a solid quarterback with elite talent around him. I think any quarterback in the NFL would love to have those wide receivers and Zeke in the backfield. That's a perfect situation. O-line's a little bit thin right now. They can't afford any more injuries, but you got a guy playing for a 2021 contract, wherever that is, with a lot of talent around him. So he's definitely a good super flex option. I just slowing Mitch down a little bit there and, holding hopes for a first round pick. Because if you could, Mitch, get some other, a second round pick and a Damian Harris type that gives you upside next year, you can improve your team next year. Again, it's going to be situation based.
And when we talk about that episode from February, this is before Dalton was even a Cowboy. So this is what the thought he could have landed in New England, Jacksonville, Chicago, the Chargers, Carolina. There were a lot of situations that we thought were a possibility. And then he landed behind Dak. It's like, all right, pump the brakes, hold those shares that you have, stash them on your super flex benches. Looking ahead here. So to wrap up on Andy Dalton, that's what you're looking to acquire. If you can get a possibly late first, I don't know many people that are going to do that, like Dan said, and they shouldn't. If I'm looking to acquire Andy Dalton, I'm not paying a first. I don't care what it is. I'm not.
Okay.
Really quick.
Go ahead.
I think you can get at least somewhat similar production for a little bit less. And especially now that hype is around Andy Dalton. So everybody's really excited about the spike in value. I think you can go get somebody else for slightly less than Andy Dalton right now.
My question is who? You could say someone else. What quarterback are you going to get for less than a first right now? That's going to outproduce Andy Dalton with that offense.
So when we look at a first now too, so I have one team that has Dak and Jimmy Garoppolo. We have concerns about Garoppolo now. It's a 4-1 team that's got a lot of talent on it. So if I had a first to trade, all right, for Andy Dalton, I would say, hey, this team's positioned to win a championship. So that first is probably going to be 10 to 12. I'd at least have a negotiation, try to get something else, maybe get a second kicked back to me that I think could be an early second. So maybe that drop from a first to second isn't too big. But to John's point, if that first is anything less than that, I'm not interested.
All right, I'll throw a few names out that I think you can get depending on who has them rostered.
Okay, let's hear.
I do think you could get Tom Brady for a similar price, if not a little bit less.
No, you can't. Not after the last few weeks.
You don't think if an absolute non-contender who had unexpected injuries is 1-4 in your league, you don't think there's a chance at a solid age
for
discount
less than you could get Andy Dalton for? No.
I agree with Mitch because Brady, not only are you going to get him this year, but we do believe he's going to be back next year. Godwin comes back this week. That Tampa offense is awesome. Mm-hmm. Dalton, we don't know where he's going to be next year, JB. That's the issue there.
You could get now his production might not be to the level of Dalton, but we don't even know what that production is going to be. But my man, Dan, cover your ears, Nick Foles.
No, it's not even close to the same. That's not even close. Dalton is going to beat Foles by 3 points per week every week for the rest of the season. Without a shadow of a doubt, if not more. And that's lowballing it.
All right, so you heard it there. At least 3 points per game, Nick Foles over Andy Dalton in 2020.
No, Andy Dalton over Foles.
Right. Sorry. I'm still waking up here, Mitch.
Yeah, you're good. You're good.
I woke up in a cold sweat because I was like, oh my God, I missed the episode. And I still had a few minutes.
I agree too, JB, because Nick Foles, if I'm in a desperate quarterback situation, I'll give something for Nick Foles, but I'm going to rather suffer than give up a first for Nick Foles. Unlike Dalton, where you're going to at least get me listening.
What about Gardner Minshew?
That one's close. I think that one's actually close.
I think that's an interesting one.
I would still rather have Dalton, to be honest. And I'm the biggest Minshew guy out there, but Dalton has the better offense.
And then last one I'm looking at here, what about Derek Carr?
Oh, dude.
Love Carr.
Yes, thank you.
It's about time we start talking about Derek Carr again.
He's a top 10 quarterback this year. He just is.
We talked about him a lot off season, and I think we got scared off it a little bit, and we kind of quieted down a little bit where he was falling. But man, him and that Raiders offense is producing.
Mm-hmm. All right, so before we really get into full blown Dak talk here, we have a few questions in the chat. Mamba Fantasy. Yes, if you have a question, drop it in here. We'll kind of answer it throughout the episode. There's a trade question here. Quick answer. Kelsey and Lamb for Kamara and Hunter Henry, or he can trade Boyd for Melvin Gordon straight up. He needs an answer. He needs a quick answer. This is Trader Duck. It's Trader Duck's alter ego, G Love.
You have to know if it's premium. I can't.
It's 1.75. I've been having a conversation with him about this for it feels like 3 weeks.
And it's Kelsey and Lamb. Without a shadow. I mean, Kelsey is so much better than Henry could ever possibly be. And Lamb is ascending to one of the top 5 to 6 wide receivers.
Now, because these trade talks have been going on, and I embellish and I exaggerate about the 3 weeks, but he also has George Kittle, I know, and then he has to start Keyshawn Vaughn because his running backs are so thin, but he just put up the most points last week. I know that. So he has a contender. Does that sway you at all?
No.
Okay, so
you definitely don't trade Boyd for Melvin Gordon. You're going to regret that at some point later. Boyd's so young and talented, and Burrow's only going to get better.
Okay.
I can make an argument either way on the other one. I agree with Mitch on the Henry point. I mean, there's a big difference there, but Kamara does fix your running back problem if John's describing it as it is, where, if you got to start Keyshawn Vaughn, you could be in trouble.
So in that situation, I'd be okay with the Boyd for Melvin Gordon, and I'm still okay with the Kelsey and Lamb. I'm okay with getting Kamara and Hunter Henry. I'm still okay with that.
I would rather just keep Kelsey and Lamb and go and try to pick up a different running back. Why give those two up? Go, if you're starting Vaughn, just step up a little bit and trade for James Robinson now that his price has dropped. Trade for Darrell Henderson, Malcolm Brown, just any running back. You don't have to go out and trade for the best one and give away 2 of your greatest players for it.
Or I like the James Robinson, Damian Harris angle. They're 2 guys.
Yeah, exactly. Damian Harris would be really good.
But why not get one of the best running backs that's still dirt cheap? Myles Gaskin.
Oh, very true.
He fits the category.
All right, my man Trader Duck. Apparently, Mitch and Dan, they may have swayed you a little bit here. All right, so in question from Mamba Fantasy, Robert Tonyan or Noah Fant, if you had to keep one, trade the other. I think in terms of what you could get because of the hype, I think you could get a significant amount for Robert Tonyan, and the Dynasty mind, it's so short term for a lot of people. Noah Fant was injured last week. People aren't even thinking about him, whereas Robert Tonyan just went off for 3 touchdowns. So I think keep Noah Fant, trade Robert Tonyan, get a significant profit. I offered Ian Thomas in 2 2021 seconds for Robert Tonyan in a tight end premium league. Quick rejection, no counter. I cried myself to sleep. Yeah.
All right. So real quick on Robert Tonyan, trade him now. Devontae Adams has been out. Devontae Adams gets a 35% target share each week. Tonyan's going to go from his 8 targets down to his 5, and you're going to be hoping that he's like every other tight end and magically gets a touchdown a week.
And that was the ideal matchup versus Atlanta, who cannot stop a tight end to save their lives. Aaron Rodgers just took advantage of that night. So sell, Robert Tonyan.
And then Alan Lazard was out as well. So that's a few additional targets that were available to go around. So yeah, Mamba Fantasy, look to move Robert Tonyan. I think you'd be surprised at what you might be able to get. Shop him around. Don't look to move him to the first person that approaches you, and then keep Noah Fant because I think he's going to be a dynasty stud. All right. So Dak Prescott, I promised that we were going to take a deep dive, not just a surface level. Oh, look to acquire him, look to trade him. First scenario, you have Dak on your roster and you are a contender, but you have one starting quarterback of value. So what I did, I sent a tweet out on, was that yesterday? It was yesterday, I think. And it got a ton of comments and a lot of really good information that's actually going on in real dynasty leagues. And this one is from at Barron's Tim 0914. He is 3-1, and this is before the result of week 5, obviously, and only Deshaun Watson left. Guys, overall, what are your thoughts there? This fits the category contender, and most Dak teams are going to be maybe not necessarily real contenders, but they're in good shape in the standings. Dan?
Yeah, I mean, I have some scenarios similar, maybe not, he's lucky to have Deshaun Watson, so he has an elite quarterback. I have leagues where I have Dak and Derek Carr, Dak and Jimmy Garoppolo. They're the ones I have to repair this week. So I'm going to be aggressive to try to get a number 2 quarterback option, because not only do you need it for Superflex, but you need it for the bye week. Who you playing that bye week? So you have to be realistic about that. And I think it's just going to be a matter of, who are your trade partners in that league? What could you do without just hemorrhaging your talent on your roster and, taking yourself out of being a contender because you over traded because someone's trying to take advantage. So I proceed with caution, but be aggressive. Get yourself a quarterback. Try to get Andy Dalton. Try to get, I'd be curious what his depth is, what he has, what his trade pieces are to obtain a quarterback. But depending on what I have my roster, if I have I have some rosters with a lot of wide receiver depth. So I know I'm probably going to lose a very talented wide receiver this week. If you have draft capital, if you got to package something, do what you have to get to 2 superflex, 2 quarterbacks.
Mitch, I'm going to bounce it over to you, but I had pages and pages of notes. This was the next great American novel of 2020, quarantine edition. But this next one was @_Taylor Cornell 5-0. Russell Wilson and Tyrod Taylor are the 2 quarterbacks that he has remaining. So again, fits that situation.
Okay.
And the notes that I had here, just thinking out loud here, get a quarterback or a quarterback plus for Dak from a rebuild or a contender that maybe has interest in Dak, but they're solid at quarterback. Don't force a trade, including Dak, if you're able to keep Dak, and acquire a bridge quarterback from somebody at a reasonable price for picks or a position of strength. And that's kind of exactly what Dan just said. You have a lot of good wide receivers. Look to move them, because ultimately we're looking to win championships here. So I know, the value. If you have the strength, I think this is a situation where you might have to lose a trade to help you win in 2020.
Well, is in one of our leagues, John, you made a strategic move and have an offer on the table for me going after a value piece of mine in exchange to help my quarterback situation, where most of these offers I'm getting in these leagues are going right after Dak. Mm-hmm. I'm not going to give you Dak for Big Ben, but you know what? I will give you another piece for Big Ben. You know what I mean? So I think owners have got to look at it like that. And I think if I'm looking to replace Dak right now and I have Watson or I have Russ or whoever your quarterback is that you have left, I'm going to try to go get the Derek Carrs. It may be too late on Teddy Bridgewater. I'm not sure. Carolina's offense is really spiking. Drew Lock, maybe his value is low enough and we know he's about to come back. So, hey, you roll the dice there and you've got 2 quarterbacks and you see where it goes. I think they're the guys I'm eyeing up a little bit.
And one thing, and Mitch, I'm sorry. Every time Dan says something, I have more ideas that pop into my mind.
All right, so here's something that I'll kick over to you when I'm done. So here's my issue with these 2 teams. You brought them up as their contenders. I don't see these teams as contenders. I think they were very good teams until bye weeks hit and COVID hits. And then they happen to have an injury at a quarterback. And now, are these teams really contenders anymore? Because now all of a sudden you have to go out and trade your other pieces to get a quarterback just to be able to have one in your superflex spot. You don't even have a backup. So now you still have to worry about bye weeks and another injury happening. So to me, these are the teams that went studs for studs, and the studs didn't work out this time for them. So now they're going to have to trade away their good talent in order just to have a quarterback in their superflex spot. So in my view, these teams really need to look at it and be like, is it best if I just tank this year? But I would almost bet you on most of these teams, they've already traded their 21 first. And that's something that if that happened and you're missing Dak and you only have 1 quarterback, you've put yourself in such a bad position that it's going to be really hard to crawl back from and be a contender and win that championship when you're trying to trade for someone like Jimmy Garoppolo or Ryan or Cousins or just any quarterback like that you could actually attain. Because I could tell you're not trading for any of those top 6 quarterbacks that we've mentioned already.
And you're paying the injury premium, and people know you're panicking, because I know, Dan, if you lose Dak Prescott, I'm sorry, buddy. I like you and all, but I'm not giving you a friends and family discount, as I refer to with a lot of the offers I get. People think they're going to get that. But one thing that popped in my mind whenever Dan was talking and saying how people have blown, sent him offers that really haven't blown him away. you got to be careful, especially when there's an injury, because people, as much as we don't want to admit it, we do get emotional and we think about, okay, I just lost Dak. I'm pissed off. It's not looking promising. And now you're getting insulting offers. There is the potential to burn some bridges very quickly there, because now Mitch, you send me Ben for Dak. I'm not interested in looking at other offers from you.
Which is a great point, which has kind of happened with some of my offers that, to certain degrees. And I think going back on Mitch's point too, this may not be a 1 week process. So in some of these leagues, I'm going to have that challenge that Mitch may be talking about. And I've got some decisions to make whether, all right, is this roster really a contender? How far in do I want to go on the trades? And the other piece is, what, if I don't get it this week, I'm not going to panic. All right. So what, I'm going to start someone else this week, and something might break the following week where an owner's more willing to trade a quarterback, and we'll see what happens. So it's going to be 1 day, 1 week at a time here managing these rosters. But do not do anything hasty. I cannot say that enough. Like, everyone thought I was panicking because I lost Dak. Yes, my heart is broken, but I am not panicking. I will make an educated decision based on the information I have in each league.
And we have to look at it. And Mitch, you made a good point, because a lot of these rosters, they may have been bolstered up by Dak, and it's going to be like drinking from a fire hose. Mm-hmm. Or, like those, the old school cartoons where a character was on a boat and there was a hole with water coming up here and they had to clog that, but then a hole with water came up there and they just had to keep doing it. That's kind of what we're going to see here. And not to say that Tim or Taylor's team, because we don't know the rest of their makeup, they very well could be a contender still. And they could have a legitimate roster with draft capital and depth at certain positions. So we don't know that for sure, obviously, but you do have to be realistic and be a little critical of your team, because everybody thinks, okay, I'm number 1 in points. I'm 5-0. Guys, I'm a contender. But then boom, 5-1, 5-2, 5-3. And that 30 point per game production that we just took for granted, it's not there anymore. So anything else there before we move on? That was one starting quarterback. What about if we have several starting quarterbacks? We have, some teams, and at NFL Robbie, 4-1. He had Dak, Cam, Stafford, and now he has Dalton. I think that's a situation where you're still okay.
Yeah. So I'll jump in here, because I actually only have him on one roster out of 41 leagues somehow. It's probably because Dan has him on every single league that we're in together. But I have Ben, Minshew, and Wentz. And then I also have Winston as my other quarterback. So I'm just not going to trade Dak. Like, it sucks that I'm not going to have him and be able to play him each week, but there is zero incentive for me to trade him unless I'm getting the absolute elite talent back. And I'm talking like a first round startup pick type player back. Because other than that, there's no reason to move him, because next year that team's going to be just as good with Dak on it.
Yeah, so similar, Mitch. I have like a couple rosters that Dalton, Russ, and Cam, Dalton, Watson, Cam. So you know what? Dak's going to sit for a year. It is what it is. He's not budging. I'll be great for next year. And just to touch on the Cowboys, I know this was in our show notes, JB. Looking at that roster, when Dallas got back in that game this week versus the Giants, for the first time in 5 weeks, I was waiting for Dallas to say, let's grind the ball out and keep our terrible defense off the field a little bit. And all of a sudden it started looking like Dallas offense again. So I think we will see a Zeke spike, which, Dalton's still in a plus pass game option, but I do think you'll see a Zach spike. And, hey, even Joe Flacco won a Super Bowl when he had talent around him. So he's got talent around him to still be good, but you will see a Zeke spike. And I'm not trading Dak to be just to tank 2021.
And that's something to look at too. So and we'll get into it, but if you don't have Dak and you're sending offers out, and I know that Dan has 3 really solid quarterbacks, don't send that low ball offer for Dak, because it's a waste of time for everybody. And yes, you're going to hear about that one situation where somebody took a tremendous hit in value, but that is the exception to the rule. And I don't think that we need to really be thinking that's the standard here. So in a nutshell, I think we can all agree in the first situation, there's the opportunity, and it's more realistic for you as the Dak manager to move him and take that hit in value if you only have one quarterback. Is that accurate to say? As compared to a situation where you have Dak, Cam, and Russ?
Yeah, man, I'm going to start that extra guy in the super flex. Unfortunately, it's not a safe quarterback, but I'll buy time until I find that quarterback.
Yep.
All right, so
agree.
Mitch, I'm waiting for you to disagree here because you were reading my notes and you're like, oh, we're going to be yelling tonight. But so what I have here in this situation, and again, you're a contender with multiple high-end quarterbacks remaining even after the Dak injury. And I said, and I might be changing my mind here a little bit as I read this out loud for the first time, but I would look to move Dak in a 1-for-1 for a high-end skill position player that can help me today while having decent longer-term value. And I said mid to late second startup value, but maybe early second round value, but I don't know if you would get that. And for me, like I said, this is completely different than the Barkleys, the Chubb, the Eckler injury, and where we were much more willing to take a hit in value, right? You know, you lost Barkley. All right, I'm going to trade him for CEH. I'm going to trade him for Dalvin Cook. But for quarterback, I'm much more reluctant and hesitant to take that drop in value. I'm not going to trade Dak for Wentz. I'm not going to do it.
Right.
You know, so I think that's going to be, I talk about interesting dynamics in your leagues. That's going to be one of the big situations where it's going to be very different when you look at the running back injuries versus Dak. So anything jumping off the page there, Mitch, that you want to yell at me for?
No, I'm going to yell at you when we get to is Dallas going to keep Dak in 2021? Because I mean,
let's do it right now because that just popped up. Under Siege 79 in the chat. Jumping ahead here. Are we asking the question if Dak even gets his contract now? Mitch, do you want me to start?
I'll start because then we'll let Dan go. And then you could somehow disagree with this because I don't understand. So I'm taking this as the non-Cowboy fan. We'll throw it over to Dan after this. But so the Cowboys have 3 options pretty much. They could just let Dak walk, and that's not going to happen. They could sign him to the franchise tag, which counts for about $38 million next year, or they could sign him to an extension. The smartest thing the Cowboys can do is just offer another franchise tag to him like next year, make him prove it for another year, and then sign him to a contract. But I don't see there's any possible way that Dak Prescott isn't the starting quarterback week 1 for the Cowboys next year. It just doesn't make any sense. With everything we know about COVID still going on, everything about what the salary cap ramifications are going to be next year, there is zero reason for them to let him go and to bring someone else in because it's going to cost another $30 million to bring in a quarterback that's just as good as Dak. I mean, not just as good, but a step below him.
All right, Dan.
Facts here. Just like my boy LeBron said the other night, he wants respect. Dak wants respect, and he deserves it. And anyone who thinks he's not their franchise quarterback and going to be there long term is not giving him the respect he deserves. Because the difference between him and Andy Dalton, as serviceable as Andy Dalton's going to be, and I think he could be competitive, he is no Dak Prescott by any means. It's not even close, ladies and gentlemen. Dak is elite, and he should be signed long-term. The only reason he wasn't signed long-term is because the dysfunctional Cowboys, you heard it here right now, I'm admitting Dallas has more dysfunction than I wanted to let on in the preseason. That whole NFC East is run by business owners instead of legendary head coaches like back in the day. And these business owners gambled on trying to get him at a bargain, and they missed the window, and then it got too expensive, and then COVID hit, and they just royally messed up this year. So next offseason, he's going to come back healthy in time for camp, barring some like infection or something bad that like a setback that scares someone away. He's going to be ready to go in camp next year, and they're going to get him signed for a long-term deal.
All right, so let me get through this before I get yelled at. Just let me get through it.
I got the challenge flag ready. It's in my hand.
That's fine. That's fine. Now, does he deserve a long-term contract? 1,000,000%. And I'm not a Cowboys fan, despite the Michael Gallup jersey here. But this is my wall of targets. It's my fantasy wide receivers. But I said it during the offseason. I said they need to sign him long-term. And we jokingly said it, but countless times, Mitch, you and I, we were jabbing at Dan, and we're like, how dysfunctional are the Cowboys? How many times is Jerry Jones going to screw this up? Because then we saw the Mahomes extension which was for $58 billion per year. We saw the Deshaun Watson extension. We saw all these different things that, okay, maybe we should have taken care of Dak first. But here's my thought. You have a player coming off of a season-ending injury, and a lot of people smarter than I am and doctors, they're coming out and saying, this isn't like the Alex Smith injury. It isn't. And he should be good to go, barring any setbacks. They took care of the surgery immediately to limit and reduce the risk of infection. But season-ending injury nonetheless. I would be shocked if the Dallas Cowboys offered a long-term deal. Now, here is where Mitch and I disagree. I think they try to franchise him. But as Dak Prescott, how can you sit there and say, Mitch, hold on. How can you sit there and say, I'm going to play one more year on the tag? Yes, it's $38 million. But after taxes, that's pretty much chump change, right? But I get it. It's $38 million. But if you don't get that long-term offer, I take that as a sign of disrespect, just like Dan talked about. I would be shocked if he was willing to play on that 1-year deal. Now, we know that there were issues, and it was is he going to sign for 4 years or 5 years? And that's where the discrepancy was between the Cowboys and Dak. Maybe now Dak says, okay, let's do the 4-year. Now, give me that discount now, or I'll take that discount now. But I just can't see him playing on that franchise tag. And that's where Mitch and I disagree.
Okay, so Dak is a really smart dude.
Yeah, absolutely.
Who is the smartest quarterback as far as what he did financially so far in his career? It's Kirk Cousins. Kirk Cousins has played everything perfectly when it comes to getting contract extensions, doing everything. So after 2 years, I really wish I would have looked up the CBA, but something happens after 2 years when you have 2 franchise tags in a row to where it makes it pretty much impossible for the Cowboys to do it for a third time, which is exactly what happened with Kirk Cousins and Washington. And so at that point, he gets the $38 million, and then he is free to go and sign a contract just like Kirk Cousins did, to where it's all guaranteed for multiple years, which is better than what even Mahomes got. After that point, Dak can go to any team and say, give me $120 million for the next 3 years, and he will get it. And that's the smartest thing that Dak can do.
All right,
even Dallas isn't Washington, though. That's like a one-off situation with Cousins with all these franchise tags. I agree with John there that there will not be a franchise tag. Dak will not be disrespected again, especially after this injury. He wants job security. I see nothing less than a 5-year deal there for Dak Prescott, or whatever, 3, 4, 5, whatever they agree on. They're going to pay up.
All right, 2 things. And I don't have my red challenge flag, so I waved the dirty. I saw that. I waved the dirty white.
Oh, I thought you were giving up. That was the white flag, being like, Mitch, you're right.
Surrendered.
No. I never surrender. But I have 2 comments. One, we talk about, and Dan, you're going to like this reference, and it hits home for me because he actually is involved with the company I work for in my day job. But if you want to talk about a quarterback that has been financially smart, you got to look at Roger Staubach, and I'm going way back. But a lot of his money was after his NFL career, but he is the richest NFL player of all time because of what he did in real estate. A little shout out there to Mr. Staubach. And Dan, you're probably drooling over there for that.
I'm still waiting for that Staubach autograph. I'm still waiting for that, by the way.
We'll get it for you. We'll get it. But one thing with Kirk Cousins, yes, it worked out perfectly for him. But he didn't suffer an injury the first year of his franchise tag. He didn't. So I just think that's the big difference here.
Okay, so are you saying if Dak is a free agent next year, he's not going to go and sign a $400 million contract somewhere else?
No, I'm not.
The season-ending injury doesn't change anything for Dak.
It changes the fact that he should not be willing to play on another franchise tag.
What? So if he gets another say week 8 next year, something happens, he misses the rest of the season. Are you telling me that there's not another team that's not going to go out there and sign him to the largest contract in history at that point? It's going to happen. Dak is proven now to where he could get injured again next year and he will still get paid.
Depends
But
what that
Teddy
injury is.
Bridgewater
Easy
had the same thing happen, and he got paid this last year, and he hasn't done anything.
But we know how these owners are operating, and you have to think that they are going to take any opportunity they have to discount these players' salaries. You have to think that.
Not when it's a free agent coming in. Dallas, sure. But you telling me in 2 years the Saints don't have a quarterback, all of a sudden Dak Prescott's available, Sean Payton's not going to throw everything at him? We've seen what the Rams do all the time. The Rams will throw money at any free agent possible.
Why would you downgrade a quarterback when you have Taysom Hill?
Very true.
And obviously, I say that in jest.
Elite.
But Dan?
The market's been set now, too. Yeah, these owners try to save money. Yeah. But once the market's set, it rolls. It happened with the running backs this year. We're waiting. They didn't want to pay running backs, and then it was a domino effect. Mahomes, Watson, it's begun. He will get paid.
All right. So, Dan, you think a long-term contract gets worked out here, correct?
100%.
Mitch, if you had to lean one way or the other, out of the three options, where do you put your
franchise tag?
Okay. I'm going to cheat here. Surprise, surprise. I have to. I have to hedge my bet. Johnny Hedge over here. I'm going to say he either holds out, he sits out because it's a franchise situation, or he gets the long-term contract extension. I would be shocked if he plays in the franchise tag. Anyway, so that's where we are on Dak Prescott. Would you guys think it's crazy if I said Dak Prescott, if his dynasty ranking in terms of quarterbacks was quarterback 10? Is that crazy?
Extremely. Yeah.
I've seen that on countless lists already.
Yeah, there's lots of lists. I mean, I'm not going to go into a Twitter thing right now, but there's lots of lists on Twitter that you should just not listen to. I mean, sorry, it's true.
All right, so let's keep it rolling here. We have a few more situations, and now you're a rebuilding team, and you have Dak on your roster, and I kind of have a little smart-ass answer. What should you do? Nothing.
That's what my notes say, too. I'm like, if I had him and I'm not how are you not contending with him right now would be the thing, right? Your team would have to be so bad that you didn't accidentally win games because of Dak Prescott.
All right, so we have, this is at FF Buddy Guy. He is now 2-3. He lost Dak for the season. Here are his quarterbacks: Dwayne Haskins, Kyle Allen, and Jameis Winston. But he does have CMC. So with that, and that's all we know. We don't know the pick situation. We don't know the depth, if he has any positions of strength. Is this a situation? Is there any reason to move CMC to try to compete? Or do you say just sit tight?
Sit tight and win all the money next year. I mean, you're going to get ETN or Najee Harris or whoever next year. So, yeah, I'd be all about that.
All right. So, Dan, is this a quick one? Anything else there? If you are rebuilding or middle of the pack and you just lost Dak?
He has zero quarterback right now, so I don't know how you get enough talent there to move forward. You don't want to give away CMC. I'm with Mitch. Win for next year.
All right. Next situation. I'm trying to keep all this straight because, what are we doing if we do not have Dak? You don't have him and you're a contender, and we're splitting this up two ways. You have 2 or 3 starting quarterbacks. So here's my note, and then Mitch, I'll bounce it over to you. If I'm strapped at quarterback, I'm a middling team, potential rebuild has Dak, and I'm looking to acquire win now pieces, that is an opportunity. So the Dak team, clearly they're in a situation they're not going to compete. Maybe they have players that can help you, that you don't have to move one of those 2 or 3 quarterbacks, but you can move, picks or rebuild pieces for the Myles Gaskin type that maybe could help put you over the edge if you need a running back or something like that, but not. It's very difficult to move a quarterback in a situation like this, and you're contending, so you're not looking to acquire Dak himself.
Okay, so you cut out a little bit, so I'll go over it real quick. So you are saying that a contending team has Dak. We aren't trading for Dak. We're trading for the other skill position players.
Yeah, and I got to look at my internet. I am getting so frustrated. It's happened multiple times now. And whenever I go back and edit, I see the gap and I'm like, oh, yeah, great. Thanks a lot, Verizon. Thanks a lot.
But this time, it cut out during when you're describing everything. I'm like, I don't know what he's talking about. But so if another team has Dak and I don't think they're going to be contending anymore, and I could go pick up some pieces off of it, that's going to be the first thing that I try to do. I mean, so if I'm contending, and honestly, most teams, we're not looking for wide receivers at this point. There's enough wide receivers in the league. We're fine with what we have. Or you can just go and trade for one. It's not a big deal. But yeah, go and get the Myles Gaskins on that team. Go and try to pick up any running back to where they don't think they will be better in 2021, because that's how you're going to gain value. Those people who have Dak who aren't going to be contender anymore are going to be like, look, I got to get rid of maybe even a Kareem Hunt. I can see Kareem Hunt being traded because they're like, this is going to be my window to get rid of him. And I'd be more than happy to go and get Kareem Hunt on any one of my teams, no matter who I have on my running back roster right now.
And you summarized it perfectly. Again, I think tomorrow morning I'm going to be calling Verizon. I'm going to say, guys, listen, Dynasty theory, first and foremost, that's your top priority. I know you have a lot of customers, but you got to fix this. You got to fix it now. But okay, Dan, next situation, you don't have Dak, you're a contender. You have 4+ starting quarterbacks that, you've accumulated through the startup, you've accumulated through trades. I said, if I'm solid at quarterback and a rebuild has Dak, it's just like we talked about, exact same situation. Now, if I'm solid at quarterback and a contender has Dak and they need a quarterback, I would that's a situation, maybe look to move a lesser quarterback plus for Dak, because you can let him sit now and you can get him at a tremendous value. Maybe somebody that sees him in that quarterback 10 range, which I think is a little low, but you're able to get him at a value because that team needs a quarterback to contend, or you can move a quarterback for a skill position player. And a team that I think is a contender, I have Josh Allen, Ben Roethlisberger, Tom Brady, and I think Gardner Minshew, and I had Ryan Tannehill, and wide receivers good for this year, but I moved Ryan Tannehill for Cortland Sutton straight up, and I felt okay with that. And maybe it was a little light, but I like that moving forward for me. But Dan, what are you looking to do maybe here in this situation? You have plenty of quarterbacks, you're a contender, and the team that has Dak is also a contender.
Yeah, I mean, hey, I don't want to gift them the championship there, so I have to proceed with caution there. So that would be the one deterrent where, I'm not going to help them out by any means, and that's one way where I don't want to improve my team. But you definitely have me thinking of other scenarios where those couple leagues where I was not able to obtain Dak, where they might be in trouble right now. This might be my buy low, my one and only buy low window to obtain him. So I'm going to start working on that right now.
I'm so happy you brought that up. So in that situation where I did the Sutton for Tannehill trade, I don't want to say the team that getting Tannehill wasn't really a contender, but I'm not exactly worried about them here in 2020. And that's not a jab. It's just being real here. But there is a league that I am 4-1, and Nick, who's in a ton of leagues with us, he is also 4-1. He just lost Dak.
Oh.
I might be hesitant to move one of my quarterbacks, even though it could help me longer term. It's one of those champ series leagues where you acquire points for most points scored regular season. Then after 3 years, there's that big $1,000 payout. So maybe we're friends, we're buddies, but I might have to be a jerk in this situation and say, sorry.
So I will counter this a little bit to you too, because I think this is how you build a juggernaut. This is the one time you could take advantage of the other really good team. And this year it might hurt you. It really might. But next year and the years to come, you could be that much better than the team that you traded a lesser quarterback to. So if you could get away with trading a Jared Goff plus a little piece for Dak, and you have other quarterbacks on your bench to where it's not hurting your depth, I think that's something that you almost should do, just basing off the odds in 2021, 22, 23. You're going to be that much better than every other team.
And that's a really good point, because Jared Goff, when I'm looking through the list in the Dynasty quarterbacks, he's right around that threshold. Jared Goff, even Aaron Rodgers.
Ryan Tannehill right now with how well he played.
Right, Justin Herbert, even Carson Wentz plus. This is all plus. We are not saying, hey, you can get Dak for one of these quarterbacks straight up. It's doubtful, but if you can add a little bit, I don't think that's an insulting offer. And if I would have told you a week ago, Carson Wentz plus a late first for Dak, you would have taken Dak 1,000% of the time, right? I think that's reasonable.
Yep.
So now is your opportunity. Maybe you could do Wentz in 2 seconds or Wentz a second and Damien Harris. Sorry, Damien, you're getting thrown into all these trades. Pack your bags. Don't get comfortable. You're moving. Anything else there? I think we did a pretty good job covering those situations. And there's one more scenario. So Dan, do you have anything else before we jump to the last one?
No, I'm good there, JB.
Same.
All right. What are we doing if we don't have Dak and we're a rebuilding team? And keep in mind, too, don't feel like you have to go out and make some move involving Dak or the team that has Dak. These are just possibilities, options, different scenarios. So if I'm rebuilding and I don't have Dak, here's a few things I thought. I can pick up that value by moving a lesser quarterback that can help. I have contender here. These notes don't even freaking make sense for this one.
If I'm rebuilding, I like that.
Yeah. What was I doing here? I think I copy and pasted something. Okay. Okay. Now this note is relevant. See, the magic of editing, I can cut out that part. Maybe I leave it in because I think people might get a chuckle. But if you're rebuilding and a rebuilding team has Dak, okay, don't be afraid to make a move for Dak, even if it cripples you. And it doesn't necessarily have to be a rebuilding team. It could be a contender that has him. But I think we're going to see situations, if you talk to somebody, they're 1-4 at this point, or they're last in points scored. And I can't make a move for Dak involving my Aaron Rodgers because that leaves me no quarterbacks. It doesn't matter. You're not contending. And especially if potential points dictates the rookie draft order, go for that 0, get that 101, get Dak. So this should be for every situation. If you are rebuilding and there's no way that you're going to compete for a championship or even the playoffs, finishing in 9th place, it's no better than finishing in dead last. So I don't worry about, my quarterback depth is going to be lacking here, because I've seen that for different people. That drops me down to 1 running back. Listen, I've seen your team. It doesn't matter if you have 1 running back. Anyway, do you guys have any thoughts here? Maybe thoughts that make sense for the situation and not my BS copy and paste that was from something else?
Just one thought on rebuilding. We talked about a little bit of our strategies in the past. We talk about how we like our roster constructions to be. I love having an elite quarterback. I love having a bell cow back. If this is my chance to get an elite quarterback next year, I'm going to find a way to do it. Especially if I don't have a draft pick lined up that's going to be, one of these elite quarterbacks coming out in the draft, or now I have a chance to use my first round pick, get an elite quarterback and get Dak. So there is something there. If you're rebuilding that way and it's your chance to get an elite quarterback that you wouldn't otherwise for next year, use the chips you have to try to get that.
Yeah, I'll completely agree. Let's say I'm a rebuilding team and I have Cooper Kupp and Baker Mayfield on my team. Like, if I had to combine both of those to go and get Dak in a different piece, I would do that in a second, because Baker Mayfield isn't going to be a quarterback that goes out there and wins you weeks just based off how that offense is and how we see it moving forward. And Cooper Kupp is a guy to where we love him, but wide receivers are just about replaceable at this point until you get up into the top 5. You know what I mean? DK Metcalf isn't really replaceable, but other ones are down below him. So that's something that I would definitely look to do if I'm rebuilding right now.
And I think that's all great feedback. Again, we covered the 4 different situations. Obviously, it's not as black and white as that. There's going to be various gray areas. It's on a spectrum. But there is one last thing I want to talk about concerning Dak. And I want you guys to jump in. There's 4 difficult trade situations, because I went through a lot of leagues last night trying to construct offers where it made sense. The 4 situations we talked about. And there's 4 scenarios that I found it really difficult. So Mitch, Dan, when I run through these, let me know if there's kind of a counterpoint to any of these. Oh, maybe you could try this or something like that. So first, if I'm rebuilding and have limited quarterback options that might interest a contending Dak manager that needs a quarterback. It's very difficult to make an offer there. Second, if I'm rebuilding and another rebuilding team has Dak, that's going to be difficult. Third, if a contender has Dak but has several other viable quarterback options, the only counterpoint that I had myself here, there's potential to acquire Dak at a discount for skill position players that you can move to bolster that team that's contending. And then last, if I'm a contender and another contender has Dak and I have 2 or 3 quarterbacks, there's really nothing to do there. Anything you guys have seen so far, if you're looking to make offers, is that pretty accurate, you think?
Overall, yeah. I mean, there's, one-off scenarios. Again, it just depends what tools you have in your tool belt, JB, to help a team. Do you have draft capital? Do you have depth at receiver? Do you have depth at running back, which is a very valued position this year where not a lot of, with all the injuries that are happening. So it depends what you have, but overall, I think you covered it.
I completely agree with everything you said. I will list one scenario that you should look at in every league. If the Dak owner, as I mentioned earlier, has traded their 2021 first, that is the team to attack because they're going to want to compete because them doing worse this year doesn't do anything for them because they don't have their first. So them sucking to rebuild, they have to do it based off players. They can't do it based off draft picks. So those are the teams I'm going to be looking to attack for the foreseeable weeks. Is the ones who maybe try to play it for one more week, then maybe next week we hit them up with not a lowball offer, but just not market value for Dak, and you might be able to get it because those guys can be like, look, I'm already in it to win it this year. I'm, pot committed is a huge thing that people look at, even if they're not pot committed. And those are the teams that I'll be looking to take advantage of this week.
I like that. And we try to give something for everybody here because obviously you're in a 12-team league. All 12 of you do not have Dak Prescott on your roster. And if you do, I want to know what kind of league that is because that would be interesting. All right, guys. And Dan, we're going to start with you.
Final thoughts.
I know this was a tough week for you, but you got through the episode. You stayed strong. But what are your thoughts here for our listeners heading into week 6?
Hey, Cowboy Nation, don't give up there, all right? There's better times ahead, especially on our fantasy rosters. I think you got a lot of sound advice tonight in a lot of different scenarios. A good overall quarterback landscape that Mitch kicked off in the beginning there. Be patient, keep chipping away there. Don't trip, and 1 week at a time, guys. There's still a lot of football left here.
All right, so to kick off mine, this is just about the COVID canceling thing we see every time that one player gets COVID on Twitter, and we have to hear about the leagues getting canceled. So the NFL and the NFLPA just released a statement today. There have been 400,000 total tests so far. They've had 39 positive for players and 60 positive for personnel. There have been a total of 100 positives out of 400,000 tests. Like, people can bash on the NFL all they want because it gets the easy likes on Twitter. But the fact is the NFL is doing an amazing job for not being in a bubble. And this season is still going with just some schedule changes. Like, honestly, what the NFL has done is really amazing. And, I think the season might actually just go off and we might actually get a Super Bowl winner at the end of the season, to where if you would have asked me 3 weeks ago, I don't know if I would have thought the same thing.
And Mitch, you're a commissioner of a few leagues, so you're praying
2 weeks. All I need is 2 weeks.
Because a lot of commissioners, they set that threshold. Hey, if we get to week 8, I think it was, then we're going to treat it like a full season. And then they had contingency plans in place. But you're like, please do not make me do any extra work. And I think a lot of commissioners are that way. But again, this is such an interesting dynamic and conversation. And Dan, did I surprise you? We kept it just over an hour tonight.
It went exactly where I knew it was going, JB.
There we go. All right. We want to thank everybody for tuning in. Find us on Twitter and Instagram at Dynasty Theory FF. Stay safe, be kind to each other, and have a great night. Thank everybody.